Hello everyone. Today we are going to do the Q&A. So thank you for submitting your questions. I feel like it's been a while. I don't even know if I've done a Q&A since the garden's really been in full production. But there are a lot of great questions, and I want to start off with one that I think is the most timely. And this question is, can I still plant seeds? I'm here in Chicago and did not get a chance to work on my garden. So first of all, yes. So you can still plant some warm season seeds, which are plants that grow during the warm and hot weather. And we do have the fall cool season coming up, where you can grow the plants that don't like the heat and prefer the cooler temperatures. I'm going to ignore the fall cool season right now because we don't even really want to start planting for that yet, but I will do a video in August, because usually around like mid to late August is when I will first start direct sowing the seeds for the fall crops. So I'll do that video in early August with everything that I plan to plant and then everything else that you can plant, even if I'm not planning to do it. But I want to focus right now on the warm season crops. So the things that I currently have blooming in my garden, could I direct sow any of these right now? And the answer is yes. Now, of course, I'm going to talk specifically about Chicago. We are zone 6A here, but I'm going to throw in a little bit of math so that you can figure out however much time you might have left and what seeds you can sow wherever you're located. So the two things that you want to know to figure out if you can still sow certain seeds is your first frost date and days to maturity of whatever seeds it is that you're looking at. So our first frost date here, which is when the temperatures start to get below 32 and you see frost on your plants, that's usually what wipes out a lot of the plants that are currently growing in my garden. But that is estimated for us for this year, October 26th. That's an estimate, an average. It can vary. I think last fall we had a really long fall, so it's going to vary each year, but I'm going to use October 26th just as a guideline. So that's going to help us figure out how many days of the warm season we have left. And then days to maturity should be on every seed packet you have. If not, then just do a search online for the specific variety, because even with the zinnias I have, certain varieties have different days to maturity. So look for the specific variety you're growing and you should be able to easily find that online. So days to maturity and your first frost date. Now, to understand days to maturity, I am going to read the exact definition that Johnny's Seed says. I'm not 100% sure if all growers follow this exact definition, but what Johnny said is it's the average number of days from seeding date, so the date you put the seed into the soil or the container, to harvest. If it's a transplanted crop, then it's the average number of days from transplant date. And if you're not sure if the crop is supposed to be direct seeded or transplanted, check the growing information box. And if it can be both either direct seeded or transplanted, so started inside, transplanted out into your garden, then the days to maturity refers to direct seeding. So for example, if I sow a zinnia seed, from that day until I can harvest the very first flower, that's the days to maturity. So you don't want your days to maturity to be right at your first frost date, because you'll just get one zinnia, and you probably want more than that. And then as far as something like tomatoes, again, sowing the seed and when you can pick the first tomato. Now my indeterminate tomatoes, they will produce from, we're getting really close here, usually end of July, early August, and again, going until the frost kills them. They do slow down a bit as the temperature starts to drop, but I can still get tomatoes into October. But harvest just essentially means the first time you can pick the fruit or the flower off of the plant. Now jumping into a little bit of the math. So for our first frost date, again, I'm going to use October 26th. Today is July 18th. That means we have 100 days until our first frost. I did not mean for this to work out so well in terms of an even round number, but it did. So what you want to do is, now I know I have about 100 days left in the growing season, so I only want to plant things that have a days to maturity less than that. And again, I really don't want to plant something that's exactly 100 or maybe even really 90, because then I have a few days, and if the frost comes early, I'll get nothing. So what I'm going to show you next then is my specific seed starting schedule. And I do include a column here for days to maturity. I will screenshot this and post it so you can see. But essentially what I did is I just sorted by days to maturity from the shortest to the longest. So here are some of the things that can be planted right now in my garden if I wanted to, and I'd be able to harvest off of them. So the zucchini round, that has a 45 days to maturity. The Sunrich Summer Provence sunflower is 50. The bush beans are both 55. The tiny Tim tomato, it says 60. Cucumber Space Master, 60. Patio Choice Tomato, 75. The white Cosmos that I have, Fizzy White Cosmos, it says 75. Cranberry Strawflower, 75. All of my zinnias, I think, are 75. Let me see if any of them are a little bit longer. And if the maturity date was arranged, because sometimes it'll say 50 to 60, I am still using the 60 just so, like, the worst case or longest case scenario, I know it'll still fit into the time that I have. But there's a lot. And then Sugar Cube Cantaloupe, I mean, that's 80 days. That's kind of where we're getting close to, do I really want to plant something now that's going to take 80 days? I have 20 days left. If it comes early, I have less than that. So that's really up to you. But the things I would definitely sow now: cucumbers, zucchini, any type of squash, any type of zinnia. I'm trying to look around the garden and see what I have here. Oh, sunflowers for sure. And especially shorter plants, because those typically reach maturity faster than taller plants will. But yeah, you can definitely sow seeds. And honestly, I like this time of year because you can just direct sow them, which I think is easier than keeping them alive inside for, you know, a couple months. So just throw your zinnia seeds out there, throw your cucumber seeds out there, and let them grow. So yes, you definitely still have time to start some of your seeds. The next question is, have you used Bloom or Blossom Booster high phosphorus fertilizers on your flowers at all? And if so, what was your experience with that versus a balanced fertilizer? So first off, yes, I do use bloom boosting fertilizers. I have granular ones, which are slow release, and I also have liquid ones, which get absorbed by the plant much faster. I will say though, I've been a little lazy this year with fertilizing. I just applied some liquid bloom boosting fertilizer a couple days ago. And usually I have started probably early July, so I'm just a few weeks behind, but I did apply granular fertilizer at the end of June, right before I went to the Bailey Nursery event. But again, that is much slower to break down and be taken up by the plants, so you're gonna see a difference faster using the liquid fertilizer. Now, when I'm more on top of my fertilizing schedule, in fact, I will put the video down below where I show what my ideal fertilizing schedule would be. I will again put the granular fertilizer at planting. I put plant tone, I'll put something that's a bit higher in nitrogen, and then once my plants start to flower or bud up, that's when I'll switch to the higher in phosphorus fertilizers. So really, I mean, I first started with having a specific fertilizer for every plant. You don't need that. Just get a balanced one, or a balanced one that's higher in nitrogen and one that's higher in phosphorus. Use the nitrogen one until your plants bud, then switch over to the phosphorus one. But last year, I did use both the bloom boosting liquid, and then I ran out of it, and then I switched to just a balanced liquid fertilizer. I did not notice a difference when I did that. Now, I didn't do any like scientific studies or comparisons. Like, I didn't do one of the same plant with the bloom boosting, one with the balanced, but at least in terms of just how I know my garden has performed in the past versus how it performed last year when I made that switch, it was the same. I didn't notice any difference. However, what I have noticed this year is that my petunias specifically have been very hungry for some liquid fertilizer. So even though I have the bloom boosting granular fertilizer in there, they are very hungry plants and they definitely want some liquid fertilizer. So that's the main reason I did it right now, because I realized, based on the fullness or lack of fullness of some of my petunias, that they were really missing out on the liquid fertilizer. So as a quick summary, when I switched from the bloom boosting phosphorus fertilizer to the just balanced fertilizer that were both liquid, I did not notice a difference. But when I've only relied on the granular fertilizer and haven't applied the liquid fertilizer, I do notice a difference in my petunias. I would say I don't really notice any difference yet in most of my plants, but the petunias were the ones that I was like, oh, I should probably give them some liquid fertilizer. Next question is, hi from San Diego. I bet your weather is nice all year round, and that makes me jealous. How do you organize and store your seeds and planting planning? Do you keep a garden journal? I am very good at planning when I start my seeds until I put the plants in the garden. And then all of my planning goes out the window. So the seed starting schedule that I showed you, looking at the days to maturity, that's what I fill out. And I have a video that shows me filling out this exact form, and it has a link to a free version of this form for yourself. So it's just on Google Drive. You can download it if you would prefer to use it in an Excel file. So I will link that video down below. But essentially what I do is, usually in February, early February, I'll get out all of the seeds that I have. I add them into this Excel file. I put in the weeks to last frost so I can calculate when I need to start the seeds. And then this way I also know what seeds I need to get. If there's anything that I grew last year, for example, I can look at last year's seed starting schedule, compare it to this one, see if I'm missing any seeds that I really want to make sure I grow again. It also does have outdoor spacing and height. I would say I use the height more often than I use the spacing because I kind of just ignore the spacing. And I really ignored it this year and things seem to be fine so far. So we'll see. But this is how I organize everything. When I plant them, sometimes I label early on, most of the time I don't. And then as I have extra plants that I don't know where to put, I just shove them everywhere and forget where I put them. So I'm very, very good at the planning during seed starting. Not so much in the garden. Now I will say in terms of fertilizing, even though I said I've been a bit lazy this year, I do have a reminder in my calendar. So anything that I need to do on like a regular basis, so weekly, bi-weekly, I'll just put a reminder in my calendar because I will forget. Even if I tell myself I'm gonna fertilize every Friday, when Friday comes around, if I don't have that written down somewhere, I will forget. So that I just keep track of in a Google Doc. But I don't do any journals. I actually do have a journal that I was planning to use in the garden. Again, winter plans when I have so much time. But every time I just come out to sit and write in the garden, I notice something and then I have to go do that garden task, which is something I'm working on so that I can just sit in the garden more often. But I really do want to have a garden journal. I think it would be fun not only to have the photos that I have in my garden every year, but some sort of like ledger of my garden every year. Next question is flower you were most disappointed with, as in it did the worst in your climate and or container, new flower seed that you're most excited to try, and which of your flowers attract the most pollinators. So answering the last part of that first, zinnias. Zinnias attract the most pollinators, the bees, the butterflies, they love them. There's not even a close second. Like I have other plants that attract pollinators, my gomphrena, my sunflowers, but zinnias, always covered. So if you want pollinators, definitely plant some zinnias. And then one year I had salvia and I had hummingbirds, which means I should probably get some salvia. But the fact that I can attract hummingbirds up here on my deck, and I think I only had 2 plants of the salvia, so that's pretty incredible. So yeah, I would say zinnias are the #1 by far in my garden. Again, the pollinators will visit most of my other plants, but nothing compares to zinnias. Even the ones that I have out here in bouquets, a butterfly was on earlier. Now, as far as flowers I was the most disappointed with, the first thing that came to my mind wasn't a flower, but it does get flowers because it bolts. I've been very disappointed with broccoli. It's a cool season crop. And the very first spring, it did beautifully. I got full heads of broccoli, and every spring since, which is 6 years now, it bolts because our springs, I feel like we're having a long period of too cold for the broccoli, and then we jump into too hot for the broccoli. So it doesn't grow enough to produce the actual broccoli head, and it just goes straight to bolting, which creates the flower. However, I do still try it in the fall because I can't help myself. But as far as flowers I've been disappointed in, I don't know if I would say anything I'm disappointed with, but I do try to avoid. One, plants that need to be deadheaded regularly. I do have a few, but I try to look for plants that don't need regular deadheading because, again, that's just another task for me to forget. I do still love sunflowers, and I do still grow sunflowers, but one year I had a lot of my space dedicated to sunflowers, but they don't bloom throughout the entire season like my zinnias or my cosmos. You know, they bloom, they get that one big beautiful flower at the top if you're growing a single stem. When I cut that off, I will get some flowers down below on the side shoots, but it's not, again, like the zinnias where they just look the same, or the petunias, they look the same all throughout the season. And then another one that I stopped growing, although again, it's not because it disappointed me, but I stopped growing geraniums because budworms love both petunias and geraniums. I love petunias enough to have them in my garden and fight with the budworms, but I didn't love the geraniums enough. So because I knew both of them were going to get eaten by budworms, I just focused on one versus the other. So I don't grow geraniums anymore. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I used to grow that I stopped growing. Oh, I will say I stopped growing zinnias that I got from the garden center, and I only grow them from seed. I feel like they do better when I grow them from seed, and there's just so many more varieties that you can start when you grow your plants from seed. So for, I think, my cosmos, my zinnias, maybe those are the main plants. Oh, and the gomphrena, I'll get a gomphrena if I see it at the store and my other gomphrena has died, but those I really do like to start from seed. So again, there hasn't been one plant that I've been like, ew, get that out of my garden. But there have been reasons why I've gotten rid of plants. They aren't consistent bloomers. I have to remember to deadhead them. They don't have specific varieties at the store, so I start from seed. But yeah, I don't think there's anything that I was like truly upset by, except for broccoli. And then the last part of that, new flower seed you're most excited to try. Well, I have one this year that I'm very excited about, and I've been excited about. It's the ballerina zinnia. It's from Johnny Seed. It was new this year. I think it's sold out. I have one that is bloomed, and it's gigantic. It is, I don't even have a dinner plate dahlia blooming, but it's almost the size of a dinner plate dahlia. It's a beautiful ballet slipper pink color. So that's the one that I'm really excited for this year that's new to my garden. I always love finding the flowers that are going to be constants in my garden. I'm excited to try any color of Gomphrena that I can get my hands on because I love it so much. I think I've grown every color. I think. I'll have to double check. And then I think just anytime there's a new zinnia, because again, if I only could grow one flower in my garden, it would be zinnias because of how productive they are, how quickly they bloom, even though they will die of powdery mildew. Maybe not this year, fingers crossed, but I love them so much. So anytime I can try a new zinnia variety as well, I get really excited. Next question is, can you give tips on how to help cut flowers last in a vase, specifically zinnias? I can't get them to last more than 3 days without looking droopy. I know about the shake test to see if the stem is hard, but they still don't last very long. A few things. One, I think in general, my zinnias do last the longest when I have a bouquet. I mean, again, some of these have been sitting here for quite a while and through rainstorms. But there are a few different things I can think of that will help your bouquets last longer. One, make sure you are using a clean vase or jar. Sometimes I will just keep filling up the same jar that I've been using for my bouquets, and I can tell that the quality of the water I'm pouring in, having not actually washed that vase or jar, the flowers aren't as happy. So always start with a clean vessel. Change the water. Now, I don't always do this, and my zinnias usually still last, but if you are having a hard time, change the water more often. I know some people do it daily. If I have a small bouquet next to my sink, I will do it daily, and the fresh water does help all the flowers last a bit longer. But generally, I tried to do it once every 3 days. I'm much better about the smaller jars and the larger vases. So yeah, try for sure a clean vessel, changing the water out more regularly, and then it could also be the point at which you're harvesting the zinnias. Let me see if I can find two and bring them over. All right, so I have two zinnias here that I just cut from my center raised bed. They both passed the wiggle test. Essentially what you want to do is harvest them as soon as they pass the wiggle test. So if you can get it, like let's say that one of these was wobbly yesterday and it is more stiff today, harvest it today. Now, I don't actually have great examples of very faded blooms because I have been keeping up on harvesting, but just to look at a bit of a difference between these two. So this one is more recently opened all the way. Again, both of these pass the wiggle test, but all of the petals on there, you know, the color still looks vibrant. They all are still like fairly nicely tight and packed together. Whereas this one, now it is a different variety, but some of the petals around the bottom are starting to dull in color. They're starting to turn almost like a little bit of a greenish brown down there. They are starting to separate a little bit from the center, and they are just starting to like flop as well. They aren't as compact of a shape as this one. So that means this bloom is older than this bloom. This bloom will last longer in a vase than this bloom will. I do also know there is the floral powder that you get with bouquets at the grocery store. I will usually save those from grocery store bouquets because I think my bouquets are prettier. So if I make a really large one with flowers that I love, I'll add that to my own bouquet of flowers. But I don't do that for most of them. Usually it's just the vase and the water, and that's all I do. Oh, I just thought of another issue that you might be having. Make sure you are removing all of the leaves from the stem of the flower before you put it into your bouquet, because if the leaves are sitting in the water, that can cause bacteria and that can make the water not as fresh as it would be and then decrease the lifespan of your flowers. Also, if the leaves are gone, that means that all of this plant is now just focusing its energy on the flower because there's nothing else for it to focus its energy on. So yeah, make sure you remove the leaves as well. If there's anything else that you guys can think of, let me know down in the comments, but I really don't do anything special other than harvesting when they're pretty fresh after they pass the wobble test, removing the leaves, clean vase, clean water. I really tried to make it the whole video outside, but me and my phone are not able to do that. So let's continue on, although there is a question here where I will go back outside so that I can show you what I do. Now these next two questions kind of go together, so I'm going to combine my answer. But the first question is, How much do you think you spend in a season just on plants and plant starts, excluding seeds? And then the other question is, how do you think your garden and garden style has changed now that you are sent free plants? Is it a limitation to try to find space for all of them? Yes. So for the first part of the question, I actually don't spend that much money on plants because I get them sent to me now, which is incredible. I went to a Proven Winners event in November 22. So starting spring of 23, 24, and 25, they will send me mostly annuals. They'll send me perennials too, but I mostly grow annuals. I will get plants directly from them, which saves me a lot of money. I still spend a lot of money on soil and containers and other plants, but it saves me so much money, and I would not spend the amount of money on the plants they send me every year. So I have many more plants than I would have without them. And I can do things a lot faster because, talking about my garage deck specifically, that was the last deck we put together. Of the 10 to 12 containers that are down there, I paid for 2 of the containers myself. I'm trying to think. The plants are mostly all from Proven Winners. I probably paid for like 10% of the plants myself. Again, excluding anything I started from seed. So I could not do as much as I do with my garden as quickly as I do it if I wasn't being sent those items. So I want to make sure that I'm setting realistic expectations, that I would not have everything that I have as quickly as I have it. Now with the front deck, which is the one we just harvested on in the last video, that one I put together over time. So that's more of like a realistic depiction. I think I got my first raised bed. I know you talked about flowers. I'll get to the point. The first raised bed I got 2019. I got the second one 2020. Maybe the next 2 2021. So I was adding a bed or 2 every season instead of having all my containers available at once. So I'm just able to do things much faster with a much higher volume. I do still buy plants. I just don't buy nearly the same percentage of plants that I used to before anyone would send me any flowers. So plants I will still buy. I will still buy most of my veggies, herbs, most of my shade plants for the parkway or for our front pots, I will buy myself. But honestly, I mean, everything started from seed I bought myself. But I think most of the plants, I'm looking at my back deck right now, most of the plants on the back deck, except for my evergreens, I bought those too. And then I don't have as many, I'm growing more seeds on the front deck. But I think all of the actual plants, or almost all of them, except for my vegetables, I got sent as well. So I don't spend that much money anymore on the plants that I have. I would say, I mean, still spend a couple $100s, but it's nowhere near what it would be if I was buying this all on my own, and I wouldn't be buying it all on my own. But to tie into that, the other question, how do you think my garden and garden style has changed that you are sent free plants? I do think it has changed. I mean, I think my style would still be the same, but I wouldn't have gotten here as quickly. Like I mentioned, it would take me a lot longer to get to where I am. And with Proven Winners, I do get to choose the plants that are sent to me. So I'm already picking the plants that fit in with my garden aesthetic or my taste. But if I was not getting plants sent to me, like let's say right now, if my garden is 50-50 seed starting plants sent to me, I would probably shift it to like 80% plants started from seed and then 20% plants that I got from the garden center. I would just be growing a lot fewer of the plants that I would buy as a transplant and be starting a lot more from seed, just because it is so much cheaper and those varieties are just really, really cool compared to what I can find in the garden centers around me. And then the last part, is it a limitation to try to find space for them all? Yes, I don't. I don't find space for all the plants sent to me. I don't find space for all the plants I start from seed, so I give them away. If you are in Chicago, make sure to follow me on Instagram because that's where most things are up to date. I will post there in the spring when I have extra plants to give away. I give away some to friends. I will leave some on the sidewalk. I last year gave a bunch to a nursing home, and I think, because they were very happy to take them, but I think I gave them too many, and they were like, oh, okay, we didn't know you had this much to give us. So I do give plants away to other people as well. So yeah, make sure to follow me on Instagram if you want to see the extra plants that I usually have end of May, early June, when I realize what I can and cannot fit in my garden. The next question is, how do you build good soil? Why do some new plants die even when there is good drainage? In container gardening, how often to fertilize? So I technically don't garden in soil, except for those few plants I actually planted in the ground on our patio. But I'm using potting mix, which is usually soilless. And then I will add in compost. I have a bunch of different composts that I use. Some of it will be chicken manure. What was the lobster and crab one from Coast of Maine? That sounds really fancy. Cow manure, whatever I can get my hands on. And I'll talk about kind of how I've created what's currently in my containers, but this is just what I've done kind of along the way. And so far it's worked. So I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing until it stops working. But basically when I first get a new container, I'll fill it with potting mix, and then I'll put about an inch layer of compost on it. I'll mix that all together. I'll add in some granular fertilizer when I'm ready to plant. And then every following year, I never empty out my large containers. I will pull out the plants either in the fall or the spring, and then before I plant my next round, I will add more compost. Sometimes I add more potting mix if I have it, but usually I'm just adding in compost and then perlite, because what happens in my containers is that the soil starts to get compact over time. A lot of mixes come with perlite in them, but that will start to shrink. So my potting mix, or what's in my containers, becomes more compact over time, which means that the drainage is decreasing. So I will add perlite also every spring just to make the mix more light and fluffy and make the plants a lot happier. So that's what I do. And then again, I will add granular fertilizer throughout the season a couple times. I will add liquid fertilizer. For that one, try to liquid fertilize every 1 to 2 weeks. Don't follow what I'm doing right now, but I am promising myself that I'm getting back on schedule. But I do have a video also where I show what I do every spring. So I'll link that down below. But this is one of those things where I'm kind of just making it up as it goes, because there hasn't really been a lot on container gardening in general, which is why I started posting videos here, but then also about how to create the best mix in containers and elevated beds that aren't at all touching the ground. So this is what I've been doing so far. I'm gonna keep doing it until it no longer works, but some of my containers now have had the same potting mix since 2020, because that's when we moved in here, and I never changed it out. I just keep adding stuff, and the plants still look good. So far so good. And then why do some new plants die even when there's good drainage? Oh my gosh, I wish I knew. I wish I knew. There are so many things that can kill plants. I swear I've put plants in and the next day they just wilted and died. And it hasn't been too hot. I did water them. It can be so many different things. So unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for you there. But when I notice a plant dying in my garden, the first things I will check for are moisture in the soil. Does it feel too dry or too wet? I will then check for pests and then any signs of any sort of fungal issues. I did kill a plant because I accidentally broke the stem because I was not being gentle enough as I was trying to get to a plant behind it. So there's so many things, including you, that can kill the plant. But those are the things I will start to look for: too much water, too little water, any pests. And then for the final question for this video, and if I didn't get to your question in the video, I will just respond to it down below in the comments where you left it. But how do you find budworms on your plants? How do you deal with them? I'm growing super petunias for the first time and have just started noticing holes in the flowers. There are things that I've done in the past. So I did try preventatively spraying a BT spray. It's an organic spray that's supposed to just impact the budworms and not any pollinators. I would spray that in the evening about once a week. They still came at, again, like the same rate as they came when I didn't spray. And you do want to spray that before, because they have to, I think, consume it. So when they're coming out of the flower before the holes are there, if it's on there, then they'll consume that spray. So I don't spray anymore. So my strategy now is just wait until they start to show up, which I notice by the holes in my petunias, and then try to catch them early on. I do have holes right now in my petunias, so I will find where the holes are, and then I will look for little small brown dots, which is their poop, because usually the budworm is sitting somewhere above its poop, and then I remove it from the plant with my fingers, and then it goes to a farm up north to live out the rest of its life. I will say there are times when I feel like no matter how often I'm looking, which I do usually in the evening, but we'll go outside today right now in the early afternoon and see if we can find any, but usually it's the evening dusk time when they do come out. I have gone out sometimes at night with my phone flashlight, but it is one of those things where it's like trying to balance the time invested in finding every single budworm versus the impact of the budworms on the flowers. Sometimes I have not paid attention and come out and realized all of my petunias are gone. If that happens, I just cut them back probably by about half, cut them back, do a bloom boosting fertilizer, and the petunias are pretty quick to grow back and fill it back up. And then of course the budworms get really excited and come back to the petunias. But let's head outside because again, I've seen some holes, and we'll see if we can find any budworm poop. Back on the front deck now, and these are signs of budworm activity. They eat petals, and yes, they will eat an entire flower. So typically what happens is, well, I just pulled that off, but typically there is an egg laid in the flower, and then as the caterpillar hatches, it eats its way out of the flower. So I don't know if I'm gonna actually see one right now since they're usually out in the evening, but I am gonna try to look for their poop, which is little black dots. I never thought that looking for poop was going to be one of my regular activities, but it is. Okay, I actually see, like, there's just one tiny dropping there, one tiny dropping there. Let me zoom in on the poop. I don't want you to miss it. I mean, it doesn't even look that gross, but that little tiny black dot, that is poop. Usually there are a bunch of dots around each other because they just poop a lot. But normally when I do find that, so the poop's in here, I'll just go through and look at the flowers nearby and see if I can find it. And let's say, for example, if there was one in here, I would just squish it and pull the flower off and throw that away. So right now, my main method of controlling budworms is hand picking them, but I don't see any right now. I will be coming out later. What is kind of interesting is they turn the colors of what they eat. So the budworms that I find on here are usually like some shade of pink, but they still can't stay in my garden. Well, that's going to be the end of this Q&A video, because what better to leave you with than poop hunting. But if you have any other questions, let me know down below. I think there were a few that I didn't get to because I don't know how long this video is going to be already. So I will respond to those where you left the comment. And I think that's it. So, oh, our garden walk is this weekend. If you want to see, again, more like live updates of the garden walk, follow me on Instagram or follow Sheffield Garden Walk on Instagram. And then I will also be filming a video here. So you'll see the gardens as well on YouTube. It'll just be a few days later. But thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye.